Hi there. Hopefully you can hear me over the air conditioning in this car. I looked at Drudge, which I do every day to make sure I haven't missed the rapture. But I wanted to tell you about something very significant I saw. The headline of Drudge was that a poll was taken and more Americans feel afraid of fake news than of terrorism. So they're actually more afraid of what they view as propaganda than actual acts of terror. And that shows, it reflects the culture. You know, when you talk about fake news, most people think you're talking about conservative voices, okay? Then the next article on Drudge was from New York Times that said YouTube is announcing this week that they will be banning and removing thousands of channels that are promoting extremism and hate speech. And it's a fairly broad definition that they spell out. And you can imagine that we're going to be somewhat impacted by this. And it's happening, like, it'll happen right away. Okay, so I'm kind of thinking about this as a sign, because if you remember, I don't know if you saw the dream I had about, I don't want to get into it all, but Sophia, the orb, and Saudi Arabia. But one of the things that was happening at the same time was that Bilderberg was meeting, and they were gathering tech giants to talk about artificial intelligence's role in filtering. Well, they were talking about artificial intelligence, but I think it's about how do we stop the spread of certain ideologies, right? That's their big concern. And I talked about in that video the Christchurch call from New Zealand on May 15th. After the terrorist attack on Christchurch, there's this cry to pressure tech companies to stop the spread of extremist ideologies on social media platforms. That's Google, YouTube, Facebook, all that. And we've seen more and more talk about locking down. And I also mentioned in that there was a meteorologist who was angrily yelling at his audience because they were angrily telling him to stop talking about the tornadoes coming in Ohio and get back to the Bachelorette. And I said, it's interesting that they're calling this bill in New Zealand the Christchurch call, because what they want to stop is the Christchurch call. They want to stop the warnings. They do not want to hear the warning from God anymore. Okay? And the only reason we're here is to warn of the judgment to come and to preach the gospel. And the Christchurch call is come and drink freely with no price, you know. Spirit and the bride say, come. Well, they want to silence that. And I said, the only reason we're here is to participate in that call. So if they turn that off, what else are we here for? So I kind of thought there's a sign that we're probably going to see something like this, you know. And then I gave a word about, or not a word, gave a word. I talked about, in another message, about how if you give the scepter to the people, their sins will reach the heavens. And unfortunately got derailed because everybody was talking about TV. That was not my point, other than to say that media is conditioning people, you know. But that the culture, this is different than any other time in history, because the culture, it is a grassroots movement, is crying out for legislation from their representatives that will bring the judgment of God. And we're talking about, you know, the rights of certain groups and stuff like that. You know what I'm talking about. And I said, this is different than other times in history, because in past it was always the state that imposed immoral ideologies, and it was the state that was responsible. But now, in this democratic Western culture, you have every single person has been given a megaphone. And for the first time, able to freely express themselves. In the past, people couldn't express themselves. They didn't dare express themselves. Their nose was to the grindstone. I'm talking about previous generations. You worked, you kept your mouth shut, and, but then starting in this last 100 years or whatever, the 20th century, and then especially with the advent of social media, we've all been given a megaphone. And I know that God's coming back. When Jesus comes back, one of the primary things he'll be doing is judging the ungodly based on the ungodly and stout words they've spoken against him. So the populace is participating in a blasphemous speaking against God on a level that's never happened before. And that's why any idiot with a drum machine can produce the most just disgusting music. And what I'm saying is everybody is able to express the evil that's in them and their antichrist sentiment. My Facebook wall is full of atheists and non-believers, and the things they say are just unbelievable. Everybody's been giving a megaphone, and they want to silence the voice of the Christ Church call. And this whole thing about YouTube that are going to remove all these channels, on the same page there's a big article about how there's a poll, and most Americans fear fake news more than actual terrorist attacks. In other words, Americans, our Western civilization, the average person is crying out for speech to be regulated. And they really want certain kinds of speech to be regulated. Speech that is not considered inclusive or whatever. Christ Church call. What they really want to silence is the gospel and the warnings. And this is not just the government, this is regular people. So I think it's a sign. We'll see what happens. I'm thinking about reaching out to the Grace Channel YouTube people that I know, and seeing, do you have an alternate plan in place for another place to store videos and communicate with your audience? Maybe we should have a website or something. I don't know if it's worth it. Maybe once it stops, it stops. But I just thought I'd address this and say I thought this was significant. And I did sense a sense of urgency watching Love by the King's video, and she linked to Paladin for Christ. She heard the sonar of a submarine, and everybody's watching Russia now. We'll just see what happens. I think that the time could be very short. I'm hoping it's short. Another thing that happened to me was that my primary source of advertising and revenue for weddings has just updated their terms of agreement so that I cannot advertise with them if I in some way infringe upon someone's feeling of being included. In other words, I have to be open to do every kind of wedding, and I think I have to actually have a kind of verbiage that, in the past I've done weddings that I wouldn't agree to, but I signed the contract already, and then I found out down the road, it's a same-sex couple or whatever, and so I just offered them the best professional service I could and moved on. But now it's getting to the point where if you're not willing to go down and march in the parade, you're against them. And they're really trying to make it impossible for Christians to function in society. So I don't know what that's going to portend for next year. I know the Lord supplies my needs, but it has been making me nervous, and I've just been thinking, well, the Lord's coming back anyway. The Lord is coming back. So just please, Lord, come. We're all saying, please, Lord, come. We desire for you to come. In Jesus' name.